This first video is overviewing how to create and then edit some basic parts of a Google Form survey. So for class, I'm creating the survey, but I do want you to know how we're collecting data. So that's what this series of videos is for. So for this first part, I'm in the shared folder that you have access to, and we're going to create a new survey. So I'm going to go to New, and Google Forms, and then a blank form. They do have templates, but I typically find that those aren't super helpful. So here you can see the basic form setup. We can name our form. I always recommend doing that right away. So I'm going to call this Psych 42 survey fall 2023. And we could add a description here. I usually leave that for the end, so that if I want to provide an overview, quick overview for participants, I can already know how I have everything set up and if there's anything I need to tell them. So first you can see here that we have a question here. So the idea is that you're going to add different questions in different sections. And if you've worked in Qualtrics before, we use blocks in Qualtrics, and in Forms, we use sections. We don't have quite as much functionality at this point in Google Forms, unless you do plugins and add-ons and things that it still doesn't quite have the functionality of Qualtrics, but we're going to keep it pretty simple. So some basic important parts to point out. We'll deal more with the questions in following videos. But first, you can see that we can go to responses here, and we can actually link it to Sheets, which is what we're going to do. So I'll come back to that in later videos as well. And then in the settings, you can see that there's a lot of options here. So we could make it a quiz, which we're not going to do. We could click on responses. We do not want to collect email addresses because this is an anonymous survey. So we're going to leave it as do not collect. We do not want to send responders a copy of their response. We do not want to allow response editing. The reason why is that if you click response editing, it actually requires that there be an email that they have to sign in. So we're not going to do sign in. And then we want to take off this restrict users in Fresno State and trusted organizations. Even though our goal is to survey Fresno State students, I know a lot of you don't like to sign in on your phone, and you'll probably complete this, or your fellow students will probably complete this on their phone. So we're going to leave that off. And then we're going to not click this limit to one response because, again, it's going to require that there be an email. So that's the response options there. And then we can go to presentation. You can see that we could show a progress bar, which I think is usually helpful because it shows participants that they're almost done. We could shuffle question order if we want to, which we're going to leave off for this survey. We can change our confirmation message, which we'll come back to at the end of setting up our survey. We can also show a link to submit another response, and we do not want that to be turned on. So I'm going to turn that off. And then we're not going to give them a response summary, and we're not going to disable autosave. So we'll leave those as is. There's also some different defaults here. So you can see that there's a default to not collect email addresses, and question default is to make questions required by default. You can turn that on, and we're not going to turn that on. I'll talk about that as we make the survey. So some other important parts of forms, you can see that there's different little icons up here at the top. So we can add add-ons, which I'm not going to talk about right now. You can customize your theme. So I could click on this and I could, for example, choose an image, and let's see. Let's choose something dark. We're going to say insert. So you can also upload an image and make that your background, but I chose an image here. And what this does is it's actually going to change the color. So you can see the color scheme change to gray. And then when we go back to the survey, you'll see that the image is uploaded. So you can do various things. You can use different fonts. So it's set to Roboto for the headers and the questions, the text. You can change the font size. So a lot of customization there. You can see that there's a preview function here. So this is for you to make sure that your survey is set up correctly. Always a very important step. There's undo and redo buttons, although you can still use Control Z and Control Y for undo and redo. And then you can also go to this send, and we'll come back to this at the end, but we can email this to people. We can set it up as a link, which is what I have set up for you. And I also have a QR code for you to distribute. So you can also shorten the URL, a variety of things you can do there. And then last but not least, you can make a copy. You can move this to the trash. You can add collaborators. I'm not going to add you as collaborators because then you could potentially edit something, and I do not want you to do that. But I'm going to give you the paper version of this. And then there's some fancier things like the script editor, getting add-ons, things like that. So that is a quick overview. And you can see we have this image now. This looks suitably dark for our mental health survey. So we're now going to go to the next video, and I'll talk about some different question types.